I'm CLA Anderson, and I'm 40 years old. And I had no idea that my life would take such an odd turn. The tale I'm going to share may surprise a lot of people, maybe even yourself. From the outside, everyone believed that I had a penthouse in the center of a dream life, Manhattan's opulent social gatherings, and a spouse who was a renowned and very skilled surgeon. Everyone claimed that I was fortunate, yet behind the glamorous exterior was a reality I couldn't tell someone about: my loneliness. Ethan, husband, was now a visitor in our own long surgeries and business at home journeys to foreign conferences over time. The evenings he returned home, our conversations became infrequent, became shorter and focused solely on work, monthly expenses, and schedules in a calm. In the soft afternoon light of April streamed into the room's corners, I received an emergency SMS from Ethan. "I'll be home late from surgery, so don't wait for me meal." So I wasn't shocked when this occurred. For the most part, I put my phone down on the table and wondered when I would give up, hoping that the doorbell will ring. My mind, I approached and unlocked. The Mason was standing in front of the door. Ethan had a younger brother named Turner. Recently got back from Los Angeles after completing the documentary. Mason had dark hair, that is, a little disorganized, wide shoulders, and contemplative eyes. CLA wrapped in a shabby leather jacket. Mason grinned at me. New York is as loud as usual. I feigned a weary smile, although Mason's entrance was like a burst of, "In this chilly and empty world, fresh air, Mason. Welcome home, flat," I said. As when Mason took over, I sensed a change in the mood. The oppressive quiet that typically occupied the flat appeared to diminish. Mason constantly carried this peculiar energy that is mild but thoughtful after a short while. Just while I was making coffee for us, a voice shouted from the door, "Did anyone hear?" When I turned around, Dylan Hayes was there. Dylan, Ethan's best buddy, looked distinct from when I last saw him. His eyes and hair were a little messy, amusing while wearing dark sunglasses, and he, Dylan, I wore a rough, worn jacket. I hurried to give him a hug after laughing. "Dylan, I assumed you were still in Paris," claimed that Paris was too dull with a shrug. Home in New York, he landed on the chair with a big smile, and it appears I arrived at the perfect moment. Where's my Dylan was always so laid back when it came to coffee, and vibrant as if he had never in the comfortable room. I felt a sudden warmth I hadn't had since we spoke for years. For hours about Dylan's exploits in Mason and France's next movie, the first project I've worked on in years. Felt alive once again, although I wasn't sure what it was. Forward. But at that precise time, I realized that the presence of Mason and Dylan would alter my life forever. That night, as the cozy golden Mason reclined back in a room full with light. The chair, his eyes reflective as he gazed out the big window, mirroring the glimmering city lights. Dylan, who was seated opposite him, had a calm grin as tapping his fingers on the gentle. From the corner, music is playing. "Have you ever considered speaker CLA?" Returning to his writing, Mason inquired. The softest way to break the silence, Mason's query resembled a delicate blade. Slipping through my past memories when I married Ethan, I was a well-known journalist who write with wisdom and clarity articles on the culture of New York and individuals. But being with Ethan had transformed me, sacrifice everything to reach the ideal wife. I gave a small laugh, although there was resentment in my laughing. "You truly believe I can write anything of value after I've been pacing all day?" This Mason did not immediately respond to the flat. He gazed at me with intense tolerance and comprehension. "That you have in the whole universe is inside you, CLA." Dylan's eyebrow was raised, breaking. I concur with Mason on the somber tone. "However, you shouldn't just write you, in my opinion. Vitality, when was the last time you..." I laughed more and shook my head as I danced. Dylan's head always managed to make things appear superficial but profound. His remarks resonated deeply with me, like a bell ringing in the silence of my heart when the clock struck 9 p.m. Dylan abruptly got up, put on a "We can't sit here all night listening to this tune." Before I could object, he approached the control panel, playing a cheerful Dylan Turned Around while holding a jazz song. He held out his hand to me in a playful way. Grin. A wonderful tune isn't supposed to be heard. While seated, CLA, we must dance. I laughed and shook my head, but couldn't help but be excited by Dylan's put my hand in his, and we started crossing the floor for the first time. Dylan whirled me around like an expert. I started joking with the dancer as I felt his delicate yet powerful hands guiding. Mason sat calmly and observed us for a while. Moment, then abruptly got up and started to go towards me and put his hand lightly on. "You don't intend to leave my waist." He grinned. "Are you out of the fun?" Gently, but his gaze were intense. Dylan laughed loudly and intensely. Mason. "Since when did you start acting like this?" Charmer between the chuckles and the music, I sensed that two males were all about me. Were so dissimilar but somehow complementary, funny, and I was brought out of my darkness by an explosive. Reality Mason's composed and considerate. I get the impression that he understood. Every secret suffering I had concealed in there, I could feel my heart pounding in my arms. Quicker with every musical beat, the exchanged looks gave me the impression that I was melting into that instant, a place where only music could be heard giggling, and a feeling I had never believed that I would encounter. When the song decelerated into a Mason leaned in with a softer rhythm, and CLA murmured in my ear, "I've never." Dylan pulled me when he saw how much you smiled. Approached from behind, spoke quietly, and "Do you know how you appear so alive? When you allow yourself to be beautiful, you are." I was overwhelmed, yet I was unable to look. When they were far away, their words were like a mirror reflecting that aspect of myself that I had overlooked over the long years of being married to each other. I felt both lost and found at the same time. I wanted to stop at the same moment, yet my heart. Another thing was whispered. Why not live? Just this for yourself. I realized that night that my life had opened a new chapter, yet there was no returning to the time when sweet jazz was still performed all around the place, but I was unable to hear the tune and music more clearly. Of dancing feet and laughter had disappeared, just steady, calm breaths filled. The chamber was dark and illuminated by the city. Mason stood directly in the lights outdoors. His piercing eyes were staring at me, mine as if he were able to see clearly. His hands lovingly grasped my soul, arms, his skin's warmth radiating like a slow-burning fire that caused me to do you shudder. "I've always hoped that one day you'd," Mason said, "truly live for yourself." Despite his soft, quiet voice, it made my. Before I could, my heart pounded like a drum. Dylan responded by moving closer from behind. He touched my shoulder with his hand, both delicate and firm. CLA Dylan spoke his loving words close to my ear, breath grazing my neck, creating, "You don't have to be since my senses are blurry. No more fearful, simply live by what you." I tried to resist it by closing my eyes. Emotional waves rushing over me, but all I saw when I opened them again were Dylan's and Mason's gentle eyes. Half comfortable, half teasing smile, Mason cautiously leaned so close to his face. His breath touched my cheek, and I could feel it. Wanted to take a step back to cling to rationale, but a whisper in my heart said that Mason's kiss arrived too late, like a gentle wind, yet it burnt through every. His lips were gentle within an inch of my body, kind yet has a strong desire that he had been silent for too long, appeared to halt behind Dylan's step. He put his arms around me more tightly, like a screen of protection from behind, a quiet confirmation. I could feel his powerful chest, put pressure on my back and the stable. His heartbeat's rhythm matched my frantic drumming, CLA Dylan's. A cozy voice echoed in my ears like a, he lowered himself and departed with a consoling lullaby. A gentle kiss on my hair that I was unaware of what was correct or incorrect. I only knew that at this precise time, I was a woman full of life's necessities, and Mason's hand left my arm, and I felt cherished. His fingers were soft all the way down to my waist, and resolute as if to confirm that I be a part of this moment. Dylan stayed his slow but full breath behind me as it touched the back of my neck with yearning. Mason, my neck is waking every nerve in my body. As I felt the warmth from both, I gasped. Dylan leaned in and spoke close to the sides. My ear once more. We only have one CLA with every feeling rushing through me, I turned to look at the last wall between them. Of my rationality totally disintegrated, I had violated the boundary I had established to keep Mason's fingers went into my hair. Dylan, drawing me in for a passionate kiss, ran his hand lightly over my shoulder. His eyes gleamed as if he were committing every detail of this moment to memory. At that moment, I didn't only feel physical proximity. It was something deeper, a unique soul-to-soul connection. The three of us felt in harmony. Ed vanished along with everything else, leaving only rapid sound breathing and my heart's beating, their warmth in the peaceful room all around me, causing me to forget everything, control every fear I once harbored, shut my eyes and allowed myself to lose myself in the unfiltered feelings I had suppressed for so every breath, every heartbeat felt like a resonance echoing through my. There were no limitations left in the chest tonight. When the room was quiet again, I held Mason's shoulder with my head. Half-open eyes looking at the glittering New York, Dylan leaned in to place a skyline gentle kiss on my forehead, and we were all aware of it. There was no way to turn back. The room had been quiet before. Aside from jazz's sluggish notes, the city lights drift like a breeze. Outside the glass windows, there is a gentle golden sparkles that sparkle like lost stars. But all I could see was I questioned the two men next to me. Is this thing real? What am I doing? Mason's hand was still lightly resting on my waist, the warmth of his touch tethering me to reality, while concurrently dragging me into an unclear fantasy. My my ears thumped loudly with my heartbeat. I sensed his gaze, frantic like a war drum, sliding across my cheeks in a soft, and every single shred is burned away by searing. Of my Dylan continued to reason from behind his arm, tenderly encircled me with his breath, gently stroking my hair that I was overcome by a familiar proximity as if I had always belonged in this moment. CLA Mason, without ever recognizing it, said in a quiet, far-off voice. Echo, however, is drawing me back into this reality that is passionate, and Dylan leaned down and closed his lips in longing. To he said, Hey, what are you thinking? Despite the assurance in his voice, perhaps he was aware of my response before I was able to talk. I wanted to reply that I didn't realize I wasn't certain what was correct or incorrect. My heart was clear, but my intellect was hazy. Had already given up, Mason brushed his hand lightly and fully. His eyes glowed along my cheek his touch was gentle despite its silent intensity. I sensed the brittle restraint. He leaned closer to our lips beneath it. This time, they were almost touching again. Was not without hesitation. His kiss was powerful and gentle, as if he were spilling all of his unspoken feelings into an inaudible symphony. I couldn't help but let myself be completely time-felt, engulfed by Mason's warmth. There was nothing, as if it had ceased, only the untamed beat of my heart and the way his arms embraced me. Yet I remembered that Dylan was still present. He moved in closer, his gaze holding their light-hearted sparkle, but now tinged with a strange, familiar gravity and strength. Remember, me, CLA Dylan, spoken softly in a low but captivating voice. When I turned to face him, Dylan tugged from the front into a close embrace, his kind grin melting away all persistent fear inside of me. I sensed his chest's warmth on mine, gently lifting my chin with my hand, and then, like a sweeping storm, his kiss came, removing every restriction I had previously known. Between the two of them, I felt like a sleepwalker breaking the rules. I didn't even realize I was the woman who woke up feeling lonely. On calm mornings, I was a new woman who yearned to live completely with each Mason, gently took my heart away from her. Hand drawing me back into his embrace, his eyes met mine as if he desired to inscribe this moment permanently. His Dylan stood near his memories forever. A hand moving softly over my shoulder, similar to a conductor planning a symphony for the three of us alone. Our strained breaths blended together in their touches in the silent room weren't just bodily, they seemed to be unsaid. Confessions. The atmosphere in the room was so much so that I thought I might dissolve. I shut my eyes and gave myself up to each and every feeling I was unsure of how long had gone. And I only knew that I was completely enthralled with a tiny voice among the embrace. I kept thinking, CLA, is this really? What are you doing and what do you want? I saw Mason and Dylan when I opened my eyes, gazing at me with kind eyes, but also a hint of concern, as if they worried that I could leave or break the moment. But as I looked into their eyes, I realized I softly whispered that I had no regrets. However, I've never felt this real before. Prior to it, the room was quiet except for our respiration and the thumping of our hearts. I was aware that this was the point beyond which there was no turning back final limit, and I was reluctant to leave. I reclined on the couch and felt as even while the world as a whole had contracted to Mason and Dylan's warmth, on either Mason softly tugged at my side. His arms were wrapped across his chest, surrounding me like a quiet assurance from Dylan, who sat on the opposite side. Close his eyes. Displaying a feeling tender is a little hard to name. Sincere but careless, I cocked my head back and shut my eyes, allowing that to a unique feeling of tranquilly permeates every my body's cell. For the first time in for years, I didn't feel isolated. I was a part of to their warmth at this time. But when I stared at Mason and opened my eyes, Dylan experienced a range of contradictory feelings. I feel this genuine joy rushing through me. Or is this only a temporary reprieve? From the isolation of Mason gently combed my hair in real life, eyes full of affection. CLA, you don't need to consider too much. Just remember that we're here. In addition to his kind remarks were like a lullaby to you, dreamily lulling me, but they also caused my heart to quiver, with Dylan's recognizable low voice cracked with dread. The sometimes we must dwell in silence, ourselves. Is it incorrect to look for a time that makes you feel life? I glanced in his direction, and Dylan seems to see clearly through my mind, but when I turned to face him and Mason, the dread that I can't see became evident that I wasn't scared of them, feared myself, fearing that these feelings were only a lovely dream. The morning light would make it disappear. I silently laughed, yet there was Dylan. There was something lost in that laugh, raised his eyebrows as though he was aware of it. What are you thinking? CLAI? After a little pause, he whispered, I'm worried I'll wake up, but I'm not sure. Up, and everything will vanish as if Dream Mason grasped my hand and held it warmly, fingers trembling as they closed mine. He responded, "It's not a dream, CLA, just a little." Dylan sat quietly. "What you feel is real." His eyes became more serious when he sat down next to me. "CLA, we are unable to replace everything except the one in your life. We can make sure you are aware of that you don't have to deal with anything." Those words by themselves seemed to pierce straight through my suddenly. A tear trickled down my cheek. I was unable to recall when I had wept. Perhaps it was on one of those nights spent alone in this chilly flat. After weeks of Ethan's absence, the sensation of love, contact, and being understood was like a tidal wave to me. Wave, only to be succeeded by a silence full of inconsistencies. I had no idea where this would take the lead, but for the first time in I didn't want to give a damn about the repercussions. Mason dabbed at the tear from my cheek and whispered, "Don't consider tomorrow, CLA." At this moment where Dylan grinned slightly when they were together and added, "And that's all that counts." I nodded a little, allowing myself to become lost in the scene again. Yet in my heart I was still able to hear a whisper in, "I wonder what will occur at night. Will the morning light make an end?" Everything vanish. I had no response, but I understood that regardless of how this turned out, I would never forget this instance, the A location where I felt completely loved and alive. The shadow of a lost wife has vanished, in a different world, but it was in the instant I became aware that I had into a new phase of my life, and there was no way to return to its previous state, been filtered by the morning light, the flimsy drapes that extend over the New York City's cozy wooden floor, was hearing automobile horns when you wake up, and feet on the crowded streets below. But time seemed to pass more slowly in this silent room. Additional, I opened my eyes gently, and the gentle glow of I'm squinting against the sun. Sharpness of Mason was still laying next to me in reality. His steady breathing sounded like a soft melody. Dylan leaned closer to ease me back to sleep. His eyes were half closed against the couch. However, I sensed that he had not fallen. My heart constricted as I fell into a deep sleep. The truth about where I was living me following the long night. What have I completed? The idea replayed itself in my head like I moved after shouting in an empty room, trying a little bit not to make a sound, but I grabbed the jacket that was thrown over Mason, opened his eyes, and looked at the chair. Was still brimming with affection, yet something had changed. The previous night's dreamlike haze, but a glimpse of uncomfortable. "Good morning," Mason muttered his husky voice. I nodded slightly, and I gave a small smile. But deep inside, I felt a flurry of feelings. Dylan changed and sat up straight, his eyes abnormally. He stared at me thoughtfully. "Are you all right?" Dylan questioned, as if attempting to interpret my thoughts from my. I wanted to respond to that unsure expression, to claim that I was all right. But how could I? I had no idea how I felt at the time. The air became more dense as we gazed at there were no longer any innocent people. No more light-hearted taunting like the night before, just quick looks full of discomfort as though we were all having trouble to discover the appropriate words to break the Mason, moved closer and more subtly in the silence. Positioned a CLA on my shoulder. "You don't have to speak." We all Dylan stood up, aware that this was a complex situation, sighed and shook off his jacket. But the only thing that I would rather not see is I glanced at Dylan with regret in your eyes. His typical gleam of mischief was vanished, swapped out for a rare. His remarks felt like a knife in their sincerity. With regret cutting through my heart, I asked, "Do I regret this myself, or am I merely I'm scared of these emotions and have never dared to admit that nobody else spoke?" I put on my jacket and got to my feet. I felt like I had to shield Mason removed me from their line of sight. forward as like he had something to say, but paused as if he were terrified. The fragile would be destroyed by any words. Dylan silently shoved me during our time together, his hands into the pockets of his jacket, and turned away as though attempting to conceal. Suddenly, something in the large room felt oppressively tiny in every way. Every movement seems to stir up a look. I turned to the conflicted feelings inside of me, left and moved in the direction of the enormous window, gazing down at the throng of people below. Outside, life continued as if nothing had happened, had occurred, but everything inside of me had altered. Mason and Dylan stood on the entire opposing sides of the space, such as two I experienced conflicting impulses in my soul, as even though I was in the center, not only physically, but also emotionally. CLA Mason spoke once more in a quiet but urgent, "You don't need to make any decisions." Dylan took a step closer now, but stayed a short distance, as if he hadn't "Take your time if you want me to feel under strain. However, keep in mind that we don't wish to witness your suffering or being filled with remorse." Dylan's remarks almost made me to tears, all I had concealed, loneliness, the want for affection, and realized was now exposed in front of two men in a manner that was nearly intolerably raw. I looked back at in our perspective, their awkwardness wasn't because due to the events that had occurred. It was due to anything that the UNS stated sensitive emotions that seemed to may break with a single, "I wanted to say something, but everything, Mason. I might whisper that I needed more time." Dylan nodded, his eyes as soft as ever. Quietly exhaled, but he didn't dispute or pressure me further, and the room collapsed. Once more into silence, but this time it seemed required even if it wasn't hefty. Before we all faced the reality of, "I closed my eyes and took a nap tomorrow." Taking a deep breath, I realized that this wasn't it was the beginning after a long night of a completely new phase in my life. I standing before the big window. The distant towers that loom like the city is surrounded by invisible,